There are technologies that make life easier, technologies that make life faster, and technologies that reveal, with almost comic cruelty, how weak and vain human beings already were. Dating apps belong firmly in the third category. They promise romance, connection, opportunity, abundance. They flatter the modern individual with the fantasy that love, sex, intimacy, and companionship can all be improved by interface design, efficient sorting, and the industrialization of first impressions. They say, in effect, why leave desire to chance when it can be optimized? And the result, for many people, is not liberation, but degradation. More options, less satisfaction. More matches, less intimacy. More stimulation, less depth. More contact, less connection. If one wanted a philosopher to explain why, one could do much worse than Arthur Schopenhauer. Now Schopenhauer, let it be admitted, was not exactly a cheerful dinner guest. He was one of the great pessimists of European philosophy, a man who looked at human life and concluded that beneath all our poetry, ideals, and self-flattering narratives, there churns something blind, restless, insatiable, and rather humiliating. He called it the will. Not will in the admirable sense, not disciplined intention or heroic perseverance, but a deeper, more primitive striving, the endless, irrational force of desire itself. For Schopenhauer, human beings do not serenely choose what they want. They are driven. They rationalize after the fact. They drape instinct in noble language and call the whole performance romance, destiny, chemistry, self-expression, or soul connection. In this, I'm afraid, he was onto something. Because what dating apps reveal with unusual clarity is that modern romantic life is often not the kingdom of love, but the marketplace of restless appetite. Swipe, judge, desire, reject, hope, compare, repeat. This is not courtship in any elevated sense. It is desire made mechanical. And Schopenhauer would immediately have recognized the underlying comedy. Human beings, convinced of their uniqueness, their depth, their subtle preferences, their complex emotional worlds, reduce each other in this environment to a few photographs, a handful of signals, a sentence or two of managed wit, and a split-second verdict. We call it freedom, we call it efficiency, but what it often looks like is vanity equipped with broadband. The first thing Schopenhauer helps us see is that desire is not trustworthy simply because it feels powerful. That is one of modernity's favorite lies. If you feel it intensely enough, it must mean something profound. But Schopenhauer thought desire was often a form of enchantment. We imagine that what we want will redeem us, complete us, justify us, or at least relieve the boredom of being ourselves. Yet the structure of desire is cruel. Once attained, the object rarely delivers what fantasy promised. Satisfaction fades. Novelty evaporates. The will merely seeks a new target. Now consider the architecture of a dating app. It is built precisely to exploit this cycle. It offers not fulfillment, but the perpetual possibility of fulfillment. Not arrival, but anticipation. Not intimacy, but the endless erotic and social suggestion of intimacy just over the next swipe. This is psychologically brilliant and spiritually rather sinister, because anticipation is often more intoxicating than possession. The app keeps desire in a heightened state of suspension. One is always on the verge of something, a better match, a more attractive option, a more exciting conversation, a more flattering confirmation of one's own desirability. The result is that people become less oriented toward encountering another person and more addicted to circulating within a system of micro-validations, disappointments, and renewed appetites. In Schopenhauer's terms, the will is not being satisfied here. It is being fed just enough to remain ravenous. And that is why so many people emerge from these platforms not fulfilled, but agitated, depleted, vaguely demeaned, and oddly lonely. They have been swimming in the signs of desire without reaching the substance of relation. The second thing Schopenhauer helps us see is the role of vanity. He understood that human beings are not moved only by sexual impulse in the crude sense. They are moved by pride, comparison, humiliation, envy, self-regard, and the need to feel chosen. Dating apps intensify all of these. They transform romantic life into a theater of quantifiable desirability. Who matched with you? Who ignored you? Who replied too slowly? Who ghosted? Who was beneath you? Who was above you? How many options do you appear to have? What is your market value in the erotic bazaar? This is not a healthy atmosphere for love. It is an excellent atmosphere for neurosis. Because once desire is fused tightly with ranking, people cease to meet each other as persons and begin encountering each other as mirrors of status. The date is no longer just a human being. He or she becomes evidence. Evidence that one is wanted, still competitive, still visible, still superior to one's rivals, still capable of exciting attention in a crowded field. And once that happens, the whole business becomes far uglier than it appears on the surface. People begin to confuse attraction with prestige. They confuse compatibility with validation. They confuse intimacy with successful self-presentation. Schopenhauer would have had no patience for the sentimental language in which this is often wrapped. He would say rightly that much of what is called modern dating is a struggle between ego and appetite, in which each side pretends it is seeking authentic connection. And here lies the deeper misery. Because the app gives people the sensation of agency while making them more passive. They are always choosing, but rarely committing. Always selecting, but rarely seeing. Always evaluating, but often from within criteria they did not consciously choose and perhaps do not even respect. The self becomes both consumer and commodity. One shops and one is shopped. One judges and one is judged. One curates oneself in order to attract the gaze and then suffers under the gaze one invited. This is a very modern humiliation. The profile becomes a little advertisement for the self. Attractive enough to draw interest, vague enough to seem spontaneous, distinctive enough to feel individual, conventional enough to remain legible. One must appear desirable without seeming desperate, interesting without seeming difficult, sexual without seeming reckless, serious without seeming heavy. In other words, one must become marketable, and marketability is often the enemy of sincerity. This is another thing Schopenhauer would insist on. Human beings under conditions of competition become strategic. They adjust, they conceal, they perform. They do not necessarily lie in the grand melodramatic sense. More often they edit, they present, they optimize. They become, in subtle ways, less real. That is part of what makes the whole system so exhausting. It is not merely the rejection, though there is plenty of that. It is the sense that one must continually produce an acceptable surface, while knowing that everyone else is doing the same. The soul grows tired of exhibition. Then there is Schopenhauer's darker point about love itself. He thought romantic passion was often nature's trick, the species using the individual for reproductive ends, while flattering him with the illusion that his longing is metaphysically unique. One need not follow him all the way into that rather bleak territory to see the relevance. Dating apps magnify the suspicion that what feels personal may in fact be mechanical, repetitive, and deeply impersonal. The same lines, the same poses, the same flirtations, the same temporary intoxications, the same disappearing acts, the same inflation of possibility and collapse into banality. People begin to feel that they are living not a love life, but a loop. And once romantic life becomes looped, cynicism creeps in. People stop risking sincerity because sincerity seems too costly for a marketplace this unstable. Better irony, better detachment, better strategic ambiguity. Better to appear unaffected than to admit hunger. But cynicism is a terrible defense. It protects the ego while starving the heart. So what would Schopenhauer advise? Or not, I think, celibacy for all, or the melodrama of renouncing human connection entirely. His real value lies in the merciless clarity with which he strips away illusion. He reminds us that desire can deceive, that vanity can dress itself as romance, that abundance can make us restless rather than free, that appetite, when industrialized, does not become noble, and that a life organized around endless seeking may make genuine attachment harder, not easier. In other words, he helps us become less naive, and that is urgently needed, because the danger of dating apps is not merely that they waste time or produce bad dates. It is that they train people in a style of relating that is fundamentally anti-contemplative. Quick judgment, endless comparison, low commitment, perpetual optionality, and a gnawing sense that one should always remain open to a better offer. That mentality may be efficient for shopping. It is disastrous for love. For love, however modern people may try to avoid the fact, requires a narrowing of the will, a decision, a renunciation of endless alternatives, a turning toward one person that necessarily means turning away from others. It requires a seriousness that marketplaces dislike, because marketplaces profit from perpetual circulation. And that is perhaps the final Schopenhauerian lesson. Dating apps are not neutral tools floating above human weakness. They are environments designed to intensify certain weaknesses while calling the result empowerment. They feed vanity, stimulate desire, multiply comparison, and keep the will in motion. They are very good at generating pursuit, and not especially good at generating peace. So yes, Schopenhauer helps us see something essential about dating apps. He helps us see that modern romantic misery is often not a mystery. It is what happens when appetite is systematized, vanity digitized, and the ancient human hunger for love handed over to a machine that profits most when no one is ever quite satisfied. That is not romance. It is desire under management, and one would do well to recognize the difference before mistaking restless consumption for a love life.